So since I am not on the agenda, I thought I would go up for the public session just to introduce it.
Sounds good.
Hey, Mayor, before you leave tonight, sign a letter. Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. This is George. The Centerville City Council is now in session. We welcome the vast audience that's joined us this evening. We appreciate you taking time to join us. We'll note for the record that we have 4 members of the City Council here in the room and one, George McEwen, attending remotely. We appreciate him making arrangements to attend remotely. We'll ask you to join with me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, after which Councilman Robin Meekum will provide us a prayer or a thought.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our kind Heavenly Father, we thank Thee so much for the opportunity we have of serving this great community, for living in a country of freedom, and living in a great city that we live in. We're thankful for the first responders and all those that help keep our country and our city safe. We're thankful for all those that support us. We ask Thee, Heavenly Father, to please bless our first responders. We ask Thee to please remember those in Texas that are suffering, and those closer today that are suffering from the fires in Weber. We ask Thee to comfort them and help them and protect our firefighters. We ask Thee to bless us at a council this night, that we will be able to work together, that we will be able to make decisions that will be pleasing unto You and will be the best for our citizens as a whole. And we say this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Robin. You'll note I stopped by the, had some reason to go by the Centerville Fire Station today, and they were sending our brush truck and a few firefighters up to assist with that fire.
Have you seen it?
I have not.
6 homes gone.
There's homes that it's burning. It's just
Oh, yeah, 300,000 chickens.
Oh,
What are they up to?
It's a lot of fried chicken.
8 or 9 now?
Yeah, last time I'd seen it was 5, but that was early, like 2, 3.
use that microphone. It's there for a reason.
Oh. There was, early this afternoon that it was.
Before we get to our business agenda, we want to take time for the open session, which is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on matters of municipal concern. I'm not aware of anyone who's scheduled ahead of time, but we'll open it up and invite anyone who would like to come to the microphone and speak about any matters of municipal concern, including Bill, if you want to speak about your.
Well, I was going to defer. My name is Bill Ince, and I have been involved in the council for a year and a half. I've been involved in the city's community corps, which is the emergency planning network, for about 10 years. Most of that time as the leader of the Canyon View District. Now I'm involved and I'm chairman of the community corps. Similar to having this in Davis, having the program in Centerville, Davis County has what is called the Davis County Citizens Corps Council. And that Citizens Corps Council sponsors the annual, or semi-biannual, beg your pardon, emergency fair every second year, and now has restarted a CERT competition between cities in the county on the alternating years. So in the odd years, it will be the CERT competition. In the even years, it will be the planning, or the emergency fair.
Okay.
So this is a brand new trophy. There are no names on it yet. There is a disagreement between Centerville and Clearfield as to who won the trophy the last time around, which was about 2011. I believe that we did, and Loretta Cole believes that they did, so that's not on here. We have a team that is enrolled. There are 7 cities of the 15 who will have teams. Any of you are invited on the 17th. I have to pre-register names. I'm not the 17th, on October the 7th, I have to pre-register names because it is being done in a federal facility and you have to be on the list to be able to get in. This trophy will make the rounds of most of the city council meetings during the month of September, trying to help encourage support. It will then reside with the winning city for a 2-year period, and their name will be on it in perpetuity. I'm a little disappointed. You probably cannot see that it says the letters in gold DCCC just underneath the band.
On the ambulance or below the?
Below the
oh yeah, you
the
can't
band.
see it there.
Yeah, just barely see it. It's not sufficiently visible. We're still working on that. But other than that, the trophy is complete. So we invite everybody from both the community and city council to attend. Thank you.
We hope you bring it home. Tammy said she wants to put that on her desk. It's so attractive.
Bill, is there opportunity for audience, or is this just a hands-on?
Anyone can participate, city council, citizen. We believe we have a couple of newspapers coming.
But by participate, you mean can just come and observe if you,
Oh, just come and observe,
Yeah.
yes.
On
You
October
have to be part of the
17th.
team, October 7th,
7th at
Job Corps
the
in Clearfield.
Job Corps in Clearfield. Okay. We're still in this
You know,
open.
Bill, if you'd moved that over one more spot, I could just claim I was hiding behind it. That's a big trophy.
We're still in the open session. I'll note before we close the open session that there is a public hearing plan for the Legacy Crossing issue regarding the parking, but not for other items such as construction, sales, and services, or the impact fees, et cetera. So if anybody wanted to speak about that, now's your chance during the open session. Otherwise, we'll move on with our agenda. Seeing none, I'll close the open session and we'll move to the other items on our agenda. The first of which is minutes review and acceptance for the August 15th council meeting minutes. I had no changes. Anybody else have any suggested changes for the August 15th council meeting minutes?
I wasn't here, but I just had an edit. Something was typed wrong, so it was hard to read. Page 6, line 48, it says the drainage utility user rate increases 2 years ago were to 10-year plan to replace. And so I think it meant to say were based on.
were to fund
Okay.
the 10-year plan.
Well, were to fund or were based on a 10-year plan. So were to fund a 10-year plan to replace existing drainage pipes.
Good catch. I missed that.
I had to reread numerous times because it led me to were to replace what was already, so.
Any other suggested changes?
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended.
Second that.
Moved and seconded that we accept the August 15th council meeting minutes as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, 5-0. Thank you. Next, we have the summary action calendar, which has 3 public utility easements. One for the Goodfellow Tullius parcel on 1850, one for the Samuelson parcel related to building a barn, I believe, and one is a storm drain and fire access easement for the Canyon Point project. Any questions about those easements?
I have one minor question. We don't see these very often, and yet there's 3 tonight, but they are totally unrelated. Is that correct?
Well, as far as
Yes.
I know, Lisa, can you
I
answer that?
can respond to that. I had a little backlog, so I was getting ahead on my PUEs. So the one that triggered it was the Goodfellow Tullius. They had a PUE. And then we just had another application for the Samuelson. They just recently received the final site plan approval, so I went ahead and put theirs on. And then the Canyon Point PUE, we were waiting for a correction to a legal description, actually 2 of their legal descriptions. So those were the Canyon Point was an older project that was just still on the list that needed to be taken care of. So.
Thank you.
Normally, those are caught at the building permit, so they won't get a building permit until they have those PUEs recorded, so.
All right, so if there are no other questions, I'd look for a motion to approve the 3 public utility easements on the summary action calendar.
I'd make a motion to approve the items on the summary action calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That appears to pass unanimously. Thank you. Next up, we have a public hearing scheduled around the proposed plan development overlay amendment for the Legacy Crossing project at Parish Lane. This requires a little bit of explanation. So we'll invite Corey Schneider, our Community Development Director, to start us off explaining what triggered this and the work that he and other staff members have been doing past months to try to resolve some problems, which I appreciate their efforts on.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you indicated, this is an amendment. If you remember, the PDO, or the Plan Development Overlay, is a customized zoning ordinance specific to a project, and the process is part of a rezone. So you have your base zoning, and then a Plan Development Overlay lets you alter that, and it is a rezone process to adopt that alteration. And so in the sake of Legacy Crossing, it's the project that's a mixed use or mixed sector area with residential, the theater, some office uses, and a couple of undeveloped lots to this point. Historically, this was an integrated development, and so you do not have in this particular project individual lots that are independent of each other, particularly in parking. That's a major factor into this project. The lots rely on each other's development to eventually equal out to a expected number of parking stalls. And the expected number of parking stalls is based on the anticipated uses. And so during the process, we anticipated there could be some office, some retail, some restaurant uses, and some apartment complexes in the original development, and we accounted for those based on what was expected for all the lots. And so that would be considered a hard count number. But if you look at what's developed, particularly on the Legacy Boulevard, you see 2 small office buildings, the printing building and the construction or the corporate offices of a construction company. They have a building on a lot, but they do not have their own independent parking. So that's one element where they're using part of the master plan parking exhibits as to satisfy their parking for their uses. Another example is the residential uses have, if you're a 2-bedroom or more, you have a requirement of 2 stalls. The residential units only have 1 stall on site, and any counts for the 2nd stall are incorporated into the master plan project. And so it's off-site from the apartment complex. And so it's an integrated count of parking. The original parking, if everybody and the uses came together, it was estimated you'd have over 1,700 stalls, or close to. I think they're over-parked on the original plan, somewhere around 90 stalls, 90, 93, I think is the count. Over-parking means that there is some excess. Based on the hard counts of all the uses, there is some excess parking.
So that means they really only needed 1,600.
All right.
Or 16.
However you do the math, and you take away the
1610.
90, and that's what they would have been the ordinance requirement for the uses. Now separate that out, and I'll bring that up later, the difference between convenient parking and hard count parking, because that's another issue that's not necessarily being addressed with the amendment. Currently, what has motivated or precipitated to this from staff's understanding is there were a few different ways to manage a problem that was beginning to occur. Lots 2 and 3, which are at the end of 200.
We have the picture up, Corey.
Lots 2 and 3 are located here in the southeast corner. Those lots, particularly if you look at the restaurant lot has more parking than the code requirement, the flat rate code cap requirement. So a lot of the master plan project is relying on at least Lot 2 for some of its parking to satisfy the hard count. Lots 2 and 3 have not developed as of yet. And it looks like at this point in time, it's probably going to take some time for lots 2 and 3 to develop. The theater was the first in the apartments. They were close together. Lot 4 is the area you see the office building. And you see the large office building. Here's the Tueller and Wright development. You have a dermatology building, and it has some tenant spaces in it. And then you have the remaining, there's 4 sublots in here. This one is to be developed. You see some signs out there advertising to develop. That would be another office. The dermatologist building is by count, by hard count for the office uses, is 15, 17 stalls short to finish out a tenant space. And as they begin that process, they held off installing the parking, and now they're down to a level where they want to fill the last tenant space, but the hard count of parking for that tenant space it's run dry. The excess stalls have run dry. There is some space in this future building to add some additional stalls to make up for what's missing. So there's still some space within the sublots of 4 to add that. The other element that's coming into play is the owner of the sublot that has the other office building. They're dependent also on how much they can build based on parking. And they could max the amount of space for an office, but they would need all part of Lot 2 at least to create and hit the hard count according to what's approved on the master plan and our ordinances. So the 2 parties got together and said, what ways we can solve this? So the choice of solving it tonight is to talk about a parking modification, and that involves looking at the PDO change along with the associated development agreement change. And that went to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission reviewed a modification to the parking. In the case of this modification, they're looking at how you can tag team uses together. So the example that they're using is the office uses of the day, the theater uses of the night. If we can tag team those, that would reduce the overall flat rate count, and it would have an advantage. The dermatologist building would have enough to go in and fill the suite today. The office building, if the peak hours are crossed, then they could build shortly as they're planning, and lots 2 and 3 would not be needed to satisfy that parking requirement. And then that would leave lots 2 and 3 independent, whatever their uses entail. That would be the count used for lots 2 and 3. And so it's this shared peak hour use that they're looking at. And part of the requirement of city ordinances to a modification is you have to have a traffic study, a parking count study, the use study, look at what's going on with a professional. They selected Reeves and Reeves Engineering to submit that study. What that study concluded is taking out lots 2 and 3, so removing those, counting for the extra second stall for the residential units, so they're including the number count of that second stall, which is different than the convenient parking, just the number parking. Looking at the office uses, which are predominant from the retail uses now, and looking at the theater, if they just took the master planned area without lots 2 and 3, the peak hour use, which was estimated, I believe, at 9 o'clock in the report, the peak hour use, there would still be now over 200, almost 300 stalls available.
So Jake, will you scroll down two pages to that graph, which I think demonstrates that.
So their peak time is occurring around 9 p.m. And so what they're saying is during the daytime hours of the theater, the parking is less and the office use can use it, but the demand for parking increases for the night hour. And there's a lot of parking on the theater site, and borrowing the other office use sites and then accounting for the apartment use second stall, there would still be a shortage on a peak hour use, not shortage, an overpark. There would be excess parking available under that scenario. And so the Planning Commission did look at that and reviewed it and deemed it acceptable. So they are recommending this approval to you. By a secondary element, if you go back up to the site plan, Jake, included in the development agreement is you have this concept of cross-access and use. So they need to use. So the example is if you separated lots 2 and 3 right here at the end of the drive aisle, they could put a wall and a fence up, and then you wouldn't be able to get out the drive aisles. So we wanted to protect that. And so lots 2 and 3 will still participate in the cross-access for the circulation element. So they're not opting 2 and 3 out of the cross-access. They're just opting out 2 and 3 from the hard count. So we'd maintain that cross-access, but we need to alter the development agreement and the exhibits from their original form. And so they will amend that exhibit of the development agreement if this were to be approved. So the Planning Commission has recommended a positive to you based on the modification standards. There could have been some other ways. The dermatologist's office, they have a tenant space that doesn't need all of the parking based on an office use, so they could have chose to go through a modification based on just their uses in their buildings. But there was an advantage of partnering up together. They might be able to explain the advantages in their presentation to you, but that's what they tag team together. Lots 2 and 3 then would be able to develop as independent. Now that doesn't solve the convenience parking issue. So I don't want you to think that the study solved the convenience parking issue. We still will likely experience some problems with the convenience parking because some reason nobody likes to park back there.
Even though there's lots of spaces there.
There's lots of spaces there, but you know, we're like water. We think what's the easiest downhill route, and that's where we park it. You know, there's some thoughts on that. There are some problems with 200 North. I know the police chief is looking into 200 North and Yon Street parking, particularly during the winter hours. The residents are using a public street. I know that by design, the north side of the private boulevard, Legacy Boulevard there, is red. So there is to be no parking there on the red zone. So that if we know people sometimes do what they want to do, so I don't want to argue out that people do what they want to do, but if the red zone is clear, then there's sufficient room for 2 travel lanes and parking on the one side. Now what's not done is how well they remove snow. The first year they came in and the snow was not conveniently or efficiently removed, and so parking was tightened up onto that roadway and it became very narrow based on the snow. But by design, if the snow is removed, there would be sufficient space for 2 travel lanes. The other thing I think is difficult is there was some early talk about using this area if we could ever get a front runner station. When you use a mixed sector or mixed use concept, you do allow some congestion based on the idea of transportation, other alternatives of transportation. That hasn't necessarily fruited yet. We are working on a bus stop and some other areas in this area with UTA because this would be a good generator of some public transit. The other issue is I know people in the apartments that come with 3 cars. And so I think it's a lifestyle issue. People are used to having as many cars as they can gather, and that's somewhat difficult. And so they're using up either their 3rd car out onto the street, or because nobody really likes to park in the North 40 to get to your apartment unit. So I think over time, as projects and build out, hopefully people realize that you can't bring a bunch of cars to that apartment complex. But we know people. They still will park where it's a little more convenient to them. From my perspective as a professional, the crowding on some of the streets helps people not do 60 miles an hour. Now, some people choose to still do 60 miles an hour to get to the movie because they're late. But, you know, over time, hopefully they realize that they can't do 60 down that to get to the movie, so they might want to go a little bit earlier. So I don't think this solves the convenience parking issue, but it does solve the development-related issues so that people can move forward. I think there is sufficient number of stalls by number count, even with the shared. So I don't see, from my perspective professionally, saying no to this, but I do want to recognize that people park where they want to park, and it causes conflicts. So I don't want to ignore that. So the recommendation is to approve it.
And the other complicating factor is that there's a number of parties that are now a part of this agreement that maybe weren't at the beginning, and this has to be
Yes, and
incorporated.
that's another important factor is that all parties in the development agreement will have to agree to this term. So all parties knowingly go into this problem. It's not going to be a surprise on the owners of the properties. All of a sudden the city changed the parking and they went, where did this go? All owners have to be a part of it, so they are at least knowingly going into it.
Thank you, Corey. Any questions for Corey?
I got a question. Corey, if you go to those graphs again, 2 pages down, it seems to me there's a mislabeling on that left graph.
Yeah,
The excess parking spaces line, it's really the difference between that line and the blue line that's the excess, isn't it?
I don't know. I let Kevin study this.
Okay.
I don't get into the questioning of
That
other
seems to be
traffic
the total
engineers.
parking space.
Yeah,
The
that
total
solid,
parking
a straight line would be the available capacity, I guess. And the difference between the two lines would be the excess parking. As illustrated in the right-hand graph, with the green line being the excess parking spaces varying as you would expect throughout the day. So just clarification.
And I believe we have one of the applicants here with us. Would anything you'd like to comment on before we go?
So unless you have a question for me, Corey does a great job of explaining it, so.
Oh, that's fine. If you,
Which applicant do you represent?
do you want to just come and state your name for the who you represent with GF Capital?
Yeah, Glenn Gersberger from JF Capital. So we are the owners of lots 1 and 2 and the primary portion of 4, so the large office building and the to-be-built office building.
Great, and I certainly appreciate your efforts to work with the dermatology office and try to find a long-term solution that everyone can agree helps.
I think in the long run, this is probably the best for everyone involved, so I'm hoping that it'll be approved.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that. If there are no more questions, I'll open it up to our vast audience for public comment. If there's anyone who would like to speak on this issue of a plan to overlay development amendment for this project. Anyone who would like to comment? If not, we'll close the public hearing and turn it to the council for comment or action.
Yeah.
Lisa?
If I could just give an introduction to the items needed for action. So as Corey explained, we are amending the plan development overlay, which is actually a rezone. So we have prepared an ordinance to amend that original approval on the PDO. And then in order to implement that PDO amendment, we have a development agreement amendment and the declaration of parking and cross-access easement amendments, essentially amending the master site plan and the parking counts. And I want to clarify on those, while, and this is the way the development agreement amendment is drafted, is that lots 2 and 3, the parking, so the parking requirements are not included in the total. They just have to install the number of parking stalls when they build, but I did put in the development agreement, they're still subject to the shared parking. So if people in the theater do want to park on lots 2 and 3, they can. So I just want to make sure that that's.
That makes sense.
Okay, so they're still subject to the shared parking, and 2 and 3 can park there, so that everybody in the project, other than residential, commercial can't park on the residential areas, but otherwise it's all shared parking, and then the shared, as Corey mentioned, cross-access. It's just that 2 and 3 are taken out of the parking calculations for the other half.
But are there any additional restrictions or modifications on the uses for 2 and 3? Or do we
Well,
see-
again, and that kind of the language in the development agreement went back and forth with their representative and attorney on, how do we want to do that? But basically, it is that they're going to come in with final site plan for 2 and 3, and we'll have to analyze that, what they can do. But 2 and 3 will not be providing any excess parking
Back
for
to the original.
Right. It's just they just have to provide the parking for whatever use it is.
You have to stand alone, right?
Right.
Okay.
But others can
Right,
share.
right.
Just want to make sure that's clear. And then and then the third item, number B, is the assignment agreement. Since the development agreement is recorded against all the properties within the project, anytime you sell a lot, that new owner has to agree to be bound by these. And there's been a few transactions that have not signed that. So there's 4 new owners that are signing the assignment agreement. They'll sign that first, we'll record that, and then they can enter into the development agreement amendment. So there's actually 4 action items for you.
So
does
to
that
be
need
clear,
to-
start with the ordinance, right? 27.
Does that need to be
24.
4 separate motions?
Let's handle the ordinance first.
Okay. Well, I think shared parking is always a really fantastic solution for many reasons. Requiring too much parking, especially when it's not necessarily used fully, I think can be an economic hamper to a city. So I fully support this kind of solution being brought to the table. So I would move that we adopt ordinance number 2017-24, amending the plan development overlay approval for the Legacy Crossing at Parish Lane plan development located at 1250 West Parish Lane, allowing a parking modification for the shared use parking and a reduction of the overall required parking for the project.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it so we can talk.
Great. Let's discuss.
Okay, I believe exactly opposite of Tammy on the parking. I think as much as it may seem like wasted space, extra parking is better than not enough parking, and convenience is hugely important because if I'm carrying groceries to my house, I'm not going to park in the farthest place and then haul them. And I don't expect other people to do that kind of an inconvenience either. It is a cultural thing, and it is our culture. And making it inconvenient for people is not going to change what they want to do. So I think at some point we need to just bow to, all right, that's how people are going to do it. We need to just deal with that. So people being able to park far away and then walk to their office, the parking really, really is important to me. It concerns me a lot, and I know Corey said, if the snow is removed well, but we live in Utah, and I've ridden with a plow driver, and they don't remove the snow; they push the snow out of the drive lane.
Yeah, so this is let me clarify one thing. That street is a private street, and the parking lots are private, so it's not city.
So it's
my
not the
understanding is
city
it's not city
it's not
crews.
city
Is
trucks?
that correct?
So do they actually lift up the snow and carry it away to some other property?
That's what we have to do. If it gets too built up, they front load it, and then they take it to the lots 2 or 1 or 2 too.
Or the back of the parking lot?
But they only do that if it starts to build up a lot.
Maybe we'll invite you, Glenn, to come back to the mic so we can make sure we record any of these that are important, as it doesn't pick up everything.
I think also one other important thing to note, council member, is that irrespective of what we're doing here today, anyone who wants to park in the apartments have free reign all the time, anytime, to park anywhere. And we're only doing this to accommodate the office uses primarily, because we're already bound to provide their parking spaces for them. If you look out during the daytime at the theater, you just see a sea of asphalt. It's just empty. And for us to go and apply for a permit to get tenant improvements done in our building now, and they say, no, we need more parking spaces before you can do that, that didn't make sense. Being able to cross those uses, time of day, made much more sense. So the apartment dwellers are always going to have a problem, irrespective of how many we build down here or build up there. That's just a fact. I'm not sure how it got passed, but it got
Not
passed.
either.
So we're the burden. We're burdened by their parking requirements.
Right.
Maybe in the future that will be different with another PDO, but we have to live with what we have. So right now, the amendment really just solves the problem primarily for all the office and building out tenant suites that we currently have vacant right now.
Right, but it does mean there are additional workers who are going to be parking in spaces that are closer than the back 40
During the
to
day.
the apartments.
Yeah, what we'll do, when we build out this office building up the top, we'll finish all these spaces in here. And by the parking study, it says we'll have an excess of 118 spaces once those are built. So that just creates even more spaces for the apartments who typically use them at night, again, when we're not using them for office uses. And it just creates greater capacity. So I don't know that we'll ever be short. I think the office users, again, you go there during the daytime and there's plenty of spaces available. And we've only got 9,000 more square feet to build out on the second floor of that main office building. So I don't see it as a problem. But I have to live there every day. And I prefer to park out here where my car doesn't get dinged. So.
Yeah, there is that. So how many?
I guess my primary question.
Go ahead, George.
I guess my primary question would be, if this is now under study and we have this new conclusion, what prevented this study from being done originally and coming to the conclusion we're reaching now, that there's an excess or that we can do a share?
Yeah, maybe Corey
Probably got to answer that one.
want to comment on how we did this, the phasing, and how we came up with the original parking requirements.
The original developer just went with the hard counts. So he built a master plan project with code numbers of the city and said, well, what I've master planned out is an extra 90 stalls, so I'm good just doing the hard count.
And that's
Without considering shared,
Right.
the off-peak.
Yeah, because when you come in for a modification, there's always a question from a developer, am I going to get it? So if I can hit the hard count numbers, that's my first place to go.
And a special need comes up, and then this is what prompted the whole situation. So.
And they obviously looked at the project as a whole and not the convenience of.
Yeah, if you kind of
users.
put yourself, and I'm editorializing for them, just trying to say, years of a plan or what I would see with them. They're coming in asking for a PDO, and they're saying, I want to adjust certain things, and I'm going to give in to these other certain things and try to get this PDO. So they're asking for the residential units, which was an addition. It's hard for them to say, can I get the residential units, and then can I get out of this? Oh, can I get out of parking too? Can I get out of, so they minimize, they figure out what they can comply with and then what they want to alter. The parking in the master plan, they could comply with, so it wasn't something from their position to say, let's do a modification too. Because they were gambling of whether they'd get the PDO first.
And Stephanie, I wouldn't disagree with you, and I wouldn't say that we're thinking opposite, because the congestion and the difficulty is in the apartments, but that has existed from the beginning. And so if you just look to the north end, we're really dealing more with solving, like our guest here today has said, the sea of asphalt during the day over there on that north end, and letting the commercial business users that are the higher daytime use. So it doesn't make the apartment situation worse. In fact, it can improve it in some ways, and it just makes sense for these other uses.
So by improving somewhat, you're saying some of those apartment dwellers will likely park on that, in those,
Those additional stalls.
on the north side
Right, once that gets done, there will be those.
in the evening.
Which are the next closest thing, yeah.
But
True.
at this point, they're not putting those in, so it's not going to improve that.
Well, next month, I'll be coming before Corey and others to propose a site
Yeah,
plan
this
for
is a
that new office
preliminary
building.
step.
So
Oh, great.
Being able
So-
to-
it's been designed, it's ready to go. As a matter of fact, I think the plans may be in for permitting now.
Fabulous. You
Have you
got
submitted the
an,
plans yet? Yeah.
One of the fantastic examples of where we've already done this shared parking is the Centerpoint Theater with the Zions Bank and the MTC, where those are office uses and are closed in the evening time. It only makes sense, rather than requiring the theater to build additional parking for nighttime use, to use the parking that's already there. So this is a similar kind of situation, just a kind of a common sense solution.
In concept, I understand, but I would beg to differ because there's not enough parking at Centerpoint in the evenings. So it's things like that that I feel like I've been burned a little, and I am nervous about shared parking when we've already got multiple examples that it didn't work, or we have more parking and more needed than what we have in that location. So it makes me hesitant. How many additional spots are you considering? I mean, are you looking at several, or are we talking just a couple?
When you say spots,
what do you mean?
You're bringing in how many people?
oh, I know in our building, we only have 9,000 more square feet to
Square
build.
feet.
So that's probably maybe 40 tops in 9,000 square feet. It's two office users. They're not like a call center. They're actually going to be a computer programming software design firm. You know, they have flex hours, so most of the people work at home. But the other tenant is probably going to be Henry Walker Homes, which is our subsidiary. So we're going to be taking people from the 4th floor and actually putting them on the 2nd floor. So that's not a net gain at all. And I know the dermatologist, I don't know what her planned uses are, or how many people you think she'll be bringing on board. I don't know.
I think they have just an office user to fill that third space, but their other second tenant has they're a nutritional consulting group, and they have a large gym, and the gym is counted towards their parking when the gym doesn't generate the parking. It's the customer client base that generates the parking. So the dermatologist would say another modification would be is just change my use tenant spaces to adjust them to what I'm actually need, not what you're requiring me. So their position would be is I actually need less than you're requiring of me. The advantage of keeping our position of requiring it is simply because the next tenant space may not be a gym. But the cross hour use just opens up a lot of excess stalls, so it may be convenient or not convenient for others to use depending on where everybody's parking.
So as we're doing this, we're reducing the amount of stalls that they are required to have by how many?
What was your let me go to the report.
Well, I think on the peak demand, there was
They're still over, yeah, you're still
yeah,
over.
still almost 300 spaces
That's the
available.
clarification I wanted to
Yeah,
make.
the issue is you see that some of those, maybe you can use the pointer there, Glenn, to show which spaces
Just up
it's
there in
on,
front of Katie.
on the
Up on
top,
the top of the,
which
Yeah.
spaces are not yet built. So there's some spaces that are not yet improved. And so the issue is that they want to, the tenants need to open their doors, but some of those spaces haven't been built because they're being built with this next building. There's enough spaces overall in the project, just not right in front of their building.
Yeah,
and
they're,
associated with that lot.
the numbers, the original amount, which remember was more 93 stalls extra. So the original amount was 1723, so minus 93 from that, and that would give you the hard count that they're actually required. And they're installing 1,471 total at build-out, just for the north half.
So Corey, let me ask you a quick question, since you mentioned that the PDO, they wanted to see what they could get on the initial, and then of course you want to whittle away once you're in. What would happen, for example, if the entire approach lane to the theater were red curbed on both sides? How many cars would we be pushing potentially into parking that may or may not exist at peak and off-peak times?
Yeah, if you took the length of that road and divided it by 19, that would give you the number that would be pushed. I don't know the length of the road
Spaces.
off the top of my head.
20, 20 spaces, to me, is a pretty good estimate.
Okay.
That's what I was gonna guess.
25, there's quite a few cars that park there.
So to me, the bottom line is I would feel very uncomfortable saying no to this because it's still overparked. So it's not as if we're actually reducing the entire project's required number of parking, which I still would feel comfortable with, but in this situation, we are still overparked as a whole.
Could I ask a clarifying question of Stephanie? Your observation is that there's not sufficient parking for Centerpoint. Why do you feel that way? Because
every time I go there, I park across 4th West.
okay, well, that is part of the parking solution. It was a Colonial Lumber
Yeah.
parking lot is part of the solution. We also have the garage now.
Chick-fil-A and the garage.
The
It's just
two-level
not as
garage,
convenient.
which has increased the parking capacity, and I haven't gone in and looked at how that's utilized. Maybe
Yeah,
some of you
I
have.
haven't actually.
And
So-
I always
Been there.
park in Zion's, and it's not a far walk at all. It's a straight shot, and I'm one of 2 or 3 cars over there. There are many, many empty spots.
Yeah, now, for clarification there as well, Zion's is not a part of the formal satisfaction of the parking capacity, but they haven't kicked you out, right?
No.
No, we did talk to them initially.
Nobody
about-
else is at Zion's that time of day.
We talked to them initially years ago about being part of that solution, but ultimately Fred Hell, Colonial Lumber, stepped up and provided the additional capacity needed. And then, as I said, since then, the parking garage has been built and it's available to both levels in the evening. So I'm a season ticket holder. I don't perceive a parking problem myself.
I suspect that to a degree what Stephanie's talking about is that
Convenient.
it
Convenience
is
parking.
inconvenient to go across the street to Colonial,
And dangerous.
and somewhat dangerous because it's not real well lit. I did know it was part of the solution, but I'm a little confused still. I apologize. So the 1723,
Maybe, can I just add some numbers there that may be easier to understand? During the hours of 8 to 5, there's an excess number of spaces, just right in here of like 685 spaces. The peak demand is 9 o'clock on a Friday night, and even at the peak demand, if you throw, a blockbuster movie that just came out, you still have almost 300 spaces still available at the peak demand.
Isn't that what this is illustrating, this graph?
Oh.
On the right? Or even
Yeah.
on the left, I guess?
Yeah, I think that.
Even on the left there.
Yeah,
You're saying the difference between the straight line and the blue line.
yeah. Yeah. That looks about right. Friday night at 9 p.m., that's your peak, and there's still this capacity available in parking spaces. So,
They're just not the most convenient spaces.
bingo. And, I've thought about that too. I mean, you bring up a really good point in the sense that it hurts business not to have available parking spaces. And here we're going to add, if you want to go back, that office building in the corner, I'm going to add this. Well, they're not going to be happy parking over here. So what I'm eventually going to have to do is I'm going to have to probably force a lot of these tenants to park on this side, just as a matter of a lease covenant that I hand out stickers or something in their cars so I could monitor it. Or I've got to find a way to solve that problem too, because I don't want to have tenants not happy there. So I get what you're saying, but I think there's solutions too that I can do as a landlord of both properties to solve that problem. And I know that Gary here in this building has expressed some concerns too, so I'm going to have to address those to get him to sign off. Mr. Tooler is going to do whatever Gary does, so if I can convince Gary that this is good for him, then I think everyone's going to be happy. But you raise a good point. We'll have to address it.
It just really worries me when you're saying, oh, there are problems and we're going to have to really work with this, and Corey's saying everybody has to sign off that they know this is a mess when they come in. It just makes me really hesitant to say bring in more businesses to that scenario.
Yeah, I think also the original developer still owns this, and they're the ones that have just one parking space per unit. So he's an easy sign-on too, because he's burdened everyone else. So he's the problem. I don't think that's going to be an issue. My biggest challenge is going to be just Gary, convincing Gary that this is going to be good for everyone. So I think it can be solved. And again, when you're out there, there's all kinds of spaces all day long. So let's use them. Let's put them to good use.
Run a shuttle from the far end.
Well, I would leave that to the apartment dwellers. That might be their solution to keep their residents happy. I don't know. I just want to keep the office users happy.
So to some degree, and like I say, at the end of the day, it's not just timing, but it's timing and absolute reduction, correct?
No.
There is not a reduction.
There's not a reduction, it's just a matter of.
So the 1723 is not being reduced, period, it's just the timing.
Just the timing.
Allowing them to
It's still
finish
the
that tenant
overpark.
space before this other building is built.
Okay.
So the dermatologist wants to finish their space now. Glenn needs to finish the second floor now, get those people moved in before some of these other parking spaces are built with the new building.
I mean, in reality, it's happening anyway, because there aren't any of these spaces that have signs in front of them that say parking only for.
Bingo.
So it's just what's happening
Right.
anyway. I'd just like to say that this is another example of letting the market solve its own problems. There are some things the city's really good at, coming in and being hardline about, but there are some things that, like you say, the business owners are going to know how they need to solve these problems so that it doesn't hurt their business.
But there's no way to solve the parking down there.
The only way to solve the convenient parking issue would be if the apartments bought more space, maybe over on this side, but of course, they're not motivated to do that.
That's right. So the city could have solved this if it was done correctly in the first place.
Yeah, it's hard to say hindsight, but it's kind of it's feeling like a transit-oriented development, kind of. And the city probably looked at it as, the front road's coming, we may have a stop here, I don't know, but it almost
Certainly our
feels
goal
like
long
that.
term.
Yeah.
And then do you attract the same kind of people that bring 3 cars to to a 2-bedroom apartment, or do you attract folks who maybe have fewer cars and start to use other?
Well, I think we're trying to develop something that our people don't want. I mean,
Not today.
They want 3 cars, and so we build it thinking, well, we'll force that on them, and people don't want, it's not what they want, so they bring the 3 cars, and then we have a mess.
No, they all want 3 cars to be parked right in front of their apartment.
That's
and
right.
And the reality is, the owner has said, you get 1 stall, and if you want to bring other cars, you can bring them, you just got to park them in the shared parking. And is it really our responsibility to say, we got to find more convenient parking for you?
No, I think it was our responsibility to say, no, you can't build that if you don't have enough parking.
I agree with Stephanie.
If you don't have enough, you're saying enough convenient parking.
Enough convenient parking.
Very close.
Because it makes the problem for us. I mean, it's not just the apartment dwellers that are suffering from non-convenient parking. It's the police officers and everybody else who has to go up and down that street. And it is Utah, and it does snow, and it does stack up, and it does get really narrow. And then people who are moving snow are backed up because they've got lots of customers, and it's not a quick fix. And had we looked at that in the first place and been realistic, it wouldn't be this mess.
So the issue before you that we have to vote on is whether you're going to approve this ordinance, which allows amends the plan development overlay. Is there more discussion, more questions, or are you ready to vote on that?
So if we say, if we say no, or if we table this,
What are you going to do?
That's coming. That's coming. Give me half a second. Is there something that can be done to force the apartments to monitor vehicles per apartment and,
Build a parking structure?
no, anybody's parked in here has to have a sticker, and you can only get 2 stickers for your 2-bedroom apartment, 1 sticker for your 1-bedroom, and anything else has to be over in the,
Well, it's
Northeast 40.
one sticker for each apartment. It's not per bedroom.
I thought it was, they said it was calculated 1 per bedroom.
1 per apartment.
Maybe Leonard Corey can clarify if there's already assigned parking stalls.
So I'm not inclined
But
I'm not inclined to deny it. I'm inclined to use it as leverage to force the apartment complex to do
But
something
what
about it.
evidence do we have that there's a problem?
We have no leverage over them at this point.
I've been down
Right.
there many times to watch a movie, and I've never had to park an unacceptable distance away, ever.
Well, and I think you're focused really on the apartments.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
and
It's
it's
not
been-
the
you
office
become a-
that's the
You become a
problem.
pawn in the game. I apologize.
It's really been the same all along. So nothing's changed here. All we're doing is we're just changing the seats at the table a little bit. They're always going to have that issue. But again, if you go back to the ownership, and that's a marketability issue for them. If they have tenants that want 3 cars, this is probably not your property. They'll have to go to another property. If it becomes enough of a burden on them, they may look for alternatives, but so far it isn't, because it isn't a problem. It's not a problem for us, it's not a problem for them, it's just a matter of convenience. So, they're well occupied, and they will always be well occupied.
I'd like to call the question. We have a motion on the table, let's find
Any reason not to vote?
I'd like to answer the question. So Corey, in the original calculation, were some units with 1 parking space and some with 2?
A 1-bedroom is only required to have 1 stall, a 2 and a 3-bedroom
I think if you
has
go to the
have
next
2
page, it
stalls.
shows that in the report.
No, that's, so,
Next
So
page.
it's based on the number of bedrooms.
based on the amount of bedrooms, so.
Okay.
Higher page, Jake.
In their primary area, the only people that can park is the 1 car inside their project.
So
Do
even
they
if,
have a sticker to identify that?
They have numbered
They have numbered
spaces,
stalls.
numbered spaces assigned.
Signed numbers.
but so what
In the
he's saying
covered
is,
parking
yes,
area.
you can have 3 cars, but you can only get 1 parking spot up close to the apartments.
Right.
Even if you have 3 bedrooms, you can have 3 cars, but you gotta park them over at the theater. You only get 1 parking stall close to
Right
the
there.
apartments, no matter how many bedrooms you have.
Which they do. Every night, they come over and they park there. But that's how we exist.
So it's not your problem. It's our problem, and I wish so much that had not been approved in the first place. It's got more problems than parking. Let's not talk about fire access if you're on a multi-level thing and the fire truck can't get you. Anyway.
Well, and that's where I'm going with Bill's. I'm not inclined to deny it. I wish there was more leverage. That's why I brought up the red curbing of the approach to the theater. That is, it actually makes it uncomfortable. Even though Legacy Theater is close, I would rather go to a different theater than to try and negotiate that during a high traffic period of time because of the way that people are parking along the side of the road, and it's just a mess. But given that it doesn't impact the analysis that's been done, which I think is a reasonable analysis, I'm not inclined to vote against it. I just wish we could do more to force the issue with the apartments to have enough adequate parking.
I'm with you on that one.
And learn from it so we don't
Do it ever
do it
again.
again.
So the question that we have is, do you approve ordinance 2017-24, which amends the planned development overlay approval for Legacy Crossing at Parish Lane? So a yes vote is a vote to approve the amendment to the planned development overlay approval. Let's start the voting with Stephanie.
Aye.
Aye.
George?
Aye.
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 That passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up, Lisa, is the assignment and assumption agreement.
Yes, I think you could do these three together if you'd like.
You want to give us a sample motion?
So moving to approve the assignment and assumption agreement, the Fourth Amendment to the Development Agreement, and the Third Amendment to the Declaration of Parking and Cross-Access Easement, implementing the PDO amendments regarding parking modifications.
Somebody willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we also approve the assignment and assumption agreement between the city and the various owners, the Fourth Amendment to the Development Agreement, and the Third Amendment to the Declaration of Parking and Cross-Access Easement Agreement. Any further discussion on those documents? To mix it up, let's start the voting with Robin.
Aye.
Aye.
George?
Aye.
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 That also passes unanimously. Thank you.
Can we, as part of this, direct the police chief to look at redlining the other curb? I'm not saying do it, I'm saying look at doing it. Because I think, to me, that is the crux of the issue. That road is not safe.
It is a private street, but I don't think there's any reason you can't ask the police chief to look at that and the fire chief.
Uh-oh, here comes.
I think you could actually ask them the thing, but they would have very little control because it's not a public street. And so the issue would be is asking the fire if it's sufficient to establish their fire lane.
So I think if you want to direct staff to, but you think the fire, it's really a fire marshal question.
I agree,
police.
it's more of, well, it's a fire marshal and a safety issue.
Particularly.
I've been there on at least one occasion when a child ran out into the street between cars. That's, to me, that's even more pressing than the fire. But whatever we can do to limit that, I would like to see done.
I mean, certainly can ask the chief, but I think with a private road, there's going to be little that the police chief can do. But
And get the chief to make his sample on a Friday night.
yeah. But you could ask the fire department to reevaluate that street and its painting to see if it's adequate for their expectations.
So can you do that, or do we need to do something different?
You better do a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we ask staff to approach both the chief of police and the fire chief to review any restrictions that could be made to eliminate street parking on the entrance to the theater street.
Second.
So we have a motion to ask our public safety staff, police department, fire department to review the on-street parking on that road, which is 200?
No, it's just Legacy.
Legacy
Yeah.
Boulevard. On Legacy Boulevard. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
No.
And those opposed?
No.
No, so we have a 4 to 1, is that correct? Robin, you voted in favor? Yes. 4 to 1 to ask the public safety folks to look at that. Okay, any other comments or questions around this Legacy Crossing issue? If not, we'll thank Glenn for his time and his effort in helping Centerville businesses try to solve problems. Not easy, but we appreciate your efforts there, and we really look forward to getting that next building built and hearing who your tenants are.
And we apologize if it seemed like we were giving you a hard time.
All right, next up we have, for the third time, the construction sales and services limit definition use table issue. Corey, we know you're really glad to take this up again, and this has been on the agenda in the past, and we held a significant amount of public comment. We've heard from many residents in favor of local businesses. We've heard a number of residences that have concerns about uses on Main Street, and this is back on the agenda to make a decision or to ask staff for more clarifying information. So I can tell from the way Corey is sitting that he is not excited about giving another staff report on this.
Especially since he got grilled on it this afternoon.
40 minutes behind already.
Okay. So council, would you like to discuss it? Are there questions you have for staff?
I'd just like to make one comment on it.
Please, go ahead.
My concern throughout this process, and we talked to Dave Bell about this when he came out to make his proposal on his property, and I was very specific with Mr. Bell that it had nothing to do with his integrity as an individual, that it was a zoning decision. And I think we've fallen afoul of the same sort of situation where people are trying to make this a referendum on the chutes, their business ethics, and their suitability as a tenant versus zoning as a whole. And so I just want to voice a little bit of frustration in that any decision that's reached cannot be based upon the potential tenant.
Either pro or con.
Right.
Pro or con. I just think that it's bad practice to say we like party A. I mean, just for those who are saying, hey, we should let the chutes in there, my question back to them has been, well, what if this was a California-based company that you didn't know from anybody? Would you have the same consideration for them that you would for a local business that's been in the community X number of years? And I would submit to you the answer would be, no, you wouldn't.
Right.
I think that's an excellent point, George. For me, the other issue that comes with this is we have existing, if this was not an existing legal non-conforming use for other, for tenants who had already been there, I would have more concern. But given it's a existing non-conforming legal use for other folks on Main Street, I think that's one of the things that complicates the issue.
So Paul,
I think it complicates it, but the flip side is, does it really complicate it? How long has this been a non-conforming existing use?
right.
And if it has been something council's wanted to entertain in the past, there's been a long period of time this has been brought back on as a use we'd like to see.
So,
I'm just trying to look at the logic of past councils.
So George, I would say that I agree with you that that would be extraordinarily problematic if the zoning decision were made based on the individual proposed tenant. In being absent last time and reading over the minutes and being here before and hearing the comments and the discussion of the council, I would disagree that that was the tone. I very much heard the tone of, is the use that the Shoops would be proposing acceptable? Are the amendments and changes that the Planning Commission proposed acceptable? Now also I'd like to say that I respectfully disagree with the points that Mayor Cutler made, that I would never consider that there are existing non-conforming uses as a reason to be motivated to go back to those uses. The changes were made for a reason. They were made to be considerate to the neighborhood joining this area. And if everyone here absolutely knows that I'm in favor of the changes that were made at the time of the Main Street overlay, and I'm probably its biggest proponent in that I want our Main Street positively redeveloped, and I want it redeveloped in a way that is considerate of the existing neighborhoods that are neighboring it. So that being said, all of those things are the considerations, the factors that I take under consideration when trying to make a decision such as this. And I've thought long and hard about it, and I've thought the conclusion that I've come to is that the new definition, it's not comparing it to the old uses at all, but it's that the new definition of limited is what makes this acceptable to me. The fact that we've heard so often that form-based code is flexible in its use, but the quality standards, the design standards, the form of where the building is on the street is what gives it its strength, because then you're building in a way in an area that is a quality level and that is flexible, so that as one use goes out, another use can go in. So what I see here is that we can allow this use now in its limited form without any harm, which I think is the measure, without any harm to the areas around it. And I don't want us to jump to the conclusion that because this use happens to be being used in an old building, that means that when that user wants to expand, that they will not comply to the standards. And so I've been really befuddled through this whole process where I've heard this won't work, we should just throw the baby out with the bathwater, they're for sure gonna push against this in the future. And so what we're not looking at the new fire station right now. We're not looking at any of that future stuff. We're not looking at what they're gonna ask for when they wanna remodel. What we're looking at right now, the only question is construction sales and service, comma, limited, appropriate for this area in our city? That is the zoning question. And because of the limited, because the design standards would still be in place if a new building were put up, if it was expanded, then I do absolutely feel comfortable that everything would be indoors. It would be an office service kind of use, which is what we've seen is successful in this area, and I would be in favor of it.
Thank you. Other comments?
George, are you going to go back and comment about your comment? Because I think, Tammy, that I understood George to say not so much that council members or Corey was looking at the commentary on a particular user, Shoup. The citizen comments were almost universally based on we should approve Shoup because, or we can't approve construction because. So it's not so much that anybody here was making that comment, it was the citizens making that comment. So, George, I don't mean to pick up your defense, but I think that's significant. I'll go forward to say...
Yeah, that is a good distinction. Thank you.
I'll go forward to say I would like to find a way to approve it for the Shoups, but in the greater scheme of things, I have great difficulty with the concept as far as the development of Main Street.
With the concept of construction sales?
Limited construction, yeah. Because it's just, it opens, in my mind, it opens Pandora's box.
And I have to agree with Bill. I don't think if we were sitting here and we said, what would be really good on Main Street? Somebody would say, I think construction sales would be great. I don't think we would be considering this for Main Street if it wasn't what's happening at the fire station. And I'm the same way. I would like to get Shoups approved. I think they would be great, but we have no guarantee, that they're gonna stay forever or what's gonna go in next door, or I just don't think it's gonna fit. And I think it's gonna open Pandora's box down there too.
Can I ask both of you, do you feel like the table of uses that is there today is adequate to encourage redevelopment?
That I don't know, but I don't feel like construction sales is going to bring in the kind of uses that I would want to add to it if I was going to add. I personally think, and this is not something I want because I always assumed that this would be commercial down there, but I think the land may end up being more valuable as residential. You've got a house that's just a block off of Main Street that's sold for $600,000.
But that's the house, that's not the bare land.
Right, but as you and I both know, the land was at least 250 of that.
Right. But they're willing to pay $500,000 for the land, which is more than 250.
No, they're paying for a building. They're not
commercial
buying
is
the land.
more.
But what I guess I'm saying is our residential prices are getting so high, they may be more valuable than the commercial.
They're still nowhere near commercial land values.
Like I said, I'd like it.
Paul, to answer your question, the acceptable table of uses without changes to the overlay, I'm not sure you will get the type of development you're looking for.
Say that again, George.
Those two issues that it says to look at it in terms of the table of uses. I think there's enough on the table of uses you could get some redevelopment. However, as I tied in the Main Street overlay last time, I'm going to tie that back in again and say given the current restrictions of the Main Street overlay, I think the fire station would be problematic in its current form.
I appreciate that opinion.
I agree.
What I hear from businesses who speak to me is it's not the overlay design standards that are the challenge as much as the allowed uses that we're, you know, if we want another dental office or another medical office, they know they can come and build there. But it's other uses who want to be on Main Street where there's attractive and frontage that we don't allow that would, if we wanted to encourage redevelopment, that would encourage it. That's one perspective.
The way I understand it is, or Corey, is if we allowed this, it would allow, like the University of Utah could be built or could be sold just as a warehouse.
Why would you buy a medical office building and try to turn it into a warehouse?
For the same reason that you would take the space behind a grocery store and convert it to storage units because it sat vacant for 4 years and nobody could figure anything else to do with it.
Yeah, I think it's
I was very afraid of the University of Utah building, but as I have been down there to the clinic a couple of times in the last month and talked to some of their people, they've convinced me that it's not up for sale, that they are there for good, in spite of the group that moved to Farmington a year ago, which made me feel very, very good. Nonetheless, that's what happens if a building sits vacant for 5 years, is that you come up with something to do with it to get some money. That's the reason I'd like to be able to see a way to get SHOOP approved, because I am afraid of what's going to happen with the fire station. But I don't see that it makes good sense.
If there's any way they could work with Corey and figure out how they would fit in under the current zoning, so we're not opening it up for other things.
So I think that's what they did, is the Planning Commission said, this is what we're comfortable with the restrictions. Now,
But we're not comfortable
Corey is
with
not,
that.
and I love Corey's comment, my understanding is his opposition to this, or as a negative staff recommendation, is not that this is not a way to make this fit, it's that it doesn't fit with the original design of Main Street, the overlay plan, which was residential and mixed use, because it's not a mixed use, it's
But
commercial.
he won't say it will fit in with the other design either, so. As much as I'd like to see it go, I can't.
Okay, well, it sounds like your minds are made up.
Find a barbecue restaurant, they can leave the name the same.
Restaurants are not allowed.
Restaurants are one of the just as a commentary.
Yeah. You really have to be a dental office or an office.
That's what I really would say is,
I know, Bill, I heard about the Chinese food restaurant that was on there for quite a while, so
And I
it's
believe,
not one of the preferred.
I believe you're going to get some other applications for similar expansion of uses, and you'll have to decide, do we still want to have vacant buildings, or do you want to allow additional uses?
Or do we change the overlay?
Or do we change the overlay?
Brand new development?
Do you think, well, do you change the overlay and you're going to get more medical office buildings? That's a great question. You could do that and try it. Is the overlay the problem, or is the uses allowed?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the question before you is, do you approve the proposed zoning code amendments that were recommended by the Planning Commission, which is Ordinance 2017-21? So if there are no more questions, let's start the voting with Robin.
No.
yes.
Did we have a
You
motion?
didn't have a motion.
Oh, we did not have a motion, you're right.
Tammy made the motion and
No,
Stephanie
No,
approved.
I have.
Was that last
was
time?
the
That was last
previous
time.
one. That was
I-
the parking.
I
Beg your pardon.
apologize. I thought we had
I thought we
made
had
a
a
motion and we were done. So
Beg your pardon.
if somebody can make a motion in favor or a motion to deny.
I would
Motion
move
to deny ordinance 2017-21.
second.
So moved and seconded that the council deny the recommendation of the Planning Commission and ordinance 2017-21. Let's.
I haven't said much. I just want to say a little in our brief spot. I almost could say yes, except for the fact that I would have to be basing it on the Shoup's good name and their good behavior. If I'm opening that up to someone else and saying, you can do this, but there are these restrictions, then I feel like in the same breath I'm saying, and I'm going to have Corey down there policing it and trying to get compliance, because I don't think that people other than the Shoup's are going to go with the restrictions that we've put on this. I really don't think.
Cook? You don't think Cook would apply with these?
Well, it's saying
Larson?
here's the new thing that we're going to allow. I don't think we're going to get good compliance other than from the Shoup's, and that makes me feel like I'm zoning to an individual.
But if you're saying that you feel comfortable with what you're requiring them to comply to, how do you feel that you can legally and rightfully and justifiably make a decision based on assuming someone is going to not comply?
Break the law.
I've been trying to come up with an analogy that's appropriate here, but my mind is just blown. Like, that's like my 15-year-old child saying, I want a 10 o'clock curfew, and me saying, no, because I assume you're going to break it, so I'm not going to set you a reasonable curfew. Our job is to set reasonable rules and reasonable expectations, and then expect that they will be followed. To say the writings that we're creating, the expectations that we're creating are reasonable, but someone's going to break them, and that's why I'm not going to approve the reasonable writings.
I said almost.
But then the logic that followed, it's just, I can't understand how that can be the way we're making decisions here at City Hall.
Well, let me take your analogy just for a second and do it this way. So you want to approve teenager A because you know that they're going to be responsible, and you have your next teenager who comes up and says, I want to do exactly what the first teenager did, but you know that they're not necessarily going to be as responsible, but you can't deny them because of that. Theoretically, anyone could do conversion of their property to limited construction sales. Or don't we just have some sales offices? Does Cook have a warehouse? They don't, do they?
No.
No, a sales office.
They could add a warehouse then, couldn't they? If we change this?
If we changed it.
Indoor, they could have some indoor
Okay,
storage.
so what I'm hearing is something interesting
Yeah,
and
that's
really
good.
valid that I haven't heard before. So what if we send it back to the Planning Commission and say, we like the idea of the limited, but it doesn't go far enough. We want to require that you must have a sales service office in the front space. I think that really,
Or a
because
showroom or
because I agree, that's,
retail
if
component.
that's the concern, that this
prevent
could just be a
having just a plain
warehouse
warehouse,
building without
Main Street.
inviting customers in the front door, then you're right, that's a really valid weakness. But rather than saying no right now, let's send it back and say, we see that there's this missing piece. Because we do want Main Street to be that inviting people in, be served here.
Yeah, what if you had another type of small business that had small equipment?
Lisa
you know,
can weigh in
vacuum
on
shop?
this. You can modify the commission's recommendation. You don't have to send it back to them. So if you want to modify what they
Okay.
recommended to, you can give direction to modify and then bring that back. You don't necessarily have to go back to the commission unless there's something you want them to weigh in on that's very important from their perspective.
My perception is you don't have any opposition to the idea of, say, a lighting showroom or a home automation showroom
Right.
on Main Street. It's
Not
the
at all.
idea that we don't want warehouses.
Warehouse type.
So Corey, don't go back.
We're going to need suggested language.
Is there something that we could ask Corey to do to say, hey, we think this is okay as long as there's the retail component or the showroom component that is required and not just a warehouse type environment? Would that alleviate anyone's concerns?
Right, so an office, a business office, where
Yeah, but
customers are
the
invited in the
issue is
front
you have
door.
to set parameters. Do you want it to be a desk? A lot of people. I
Yeah,
mean,
you put a desk in the
Right.
corner, that's
Yeah, I
still
mean,
not.
I'm struggling with another user that's come in and they said it was their office and it was just a little desk with a chair. The rest of it was an entire processing of noodles and
Yeah, I don't
and
think.
rice. So,
I don't think that's the
you know,
answer.
it's 50%, like the form-based code requires the first 50% of the building to be retail,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can change the back half and the upper floors. So it's 50%. Well, not to beat a dead horse, but is the fire station 50% apparatus bay? Or is it 75% apparatus bay? So now you're getting into where do you want to draw the line? And then if they have to remodel, in order to get to that 50%, changes occupancy loads or whatever else that may come into play.
I think it's a good discussion to have, but it's a little outside the context of this specific one. I mean, there's more thought that has to be put into that.
And that's why I'm saying don't make it on the fire station use. Make it on what you want, and then if the fire station use fits, great.
But you bring up a good point about the noodle place. There's a vacant building, they want to occupy it, and they're not doing a formal restaurant, it's more of a catering operation, right, or a wholesale food. Is that an acceptable use for a vacant building?
Well, right now, the answer was no, so that solved that for now. The question will be will they come back for something else later?
If you had, well, the question is, what if somebody else wanted to open a small bakery on Main Street? I think many people would say, oh, that'd be great. It'd be great to have a nice bakery on Main Street. But people would say...
As long as you don't have dog food like Ogden. Bakery and dog food in the same evening cooking isn't well.
So right now, that bakery is not allowed, correct?
Right, you don't have the opportunity.
Well, we have an eatery.
Yes, but you have a nonconformity eatery. Right now, you have to be part of a mixed use to get any type of food service. It's the additional uses, so as a primary use, it's not allowed.
I think we owe it to them to make a decision and not say, well, maybe we could do this and maybe we could do that. I just don't think it's...
Well, and you're right, but I think we owe it to our entire city to start figuring out how to say yes more often. And I know we need to be thorough. I completely agree with that. But
okay, Tammy, I'm going to take issue with that. The
Okay.
city council does say yes on a number of occasions, but having a thoughtful process should not be interpreted as always no.
no, I definitely wasn't insinuating that. Don't disagree.
So it sounds like, rather than try
As
to...
painful as it is, I think the discussion that we've started right now is actually next week's work session. Isn't that where we're going, really?
Yeah.
Is the discussion of it's sitting down with the Planning Commission and saying, what is it we really want on Main Street and how do we get there? So the timing of this question is unfortunate. And I don't know. I mean, would you rather wait while we have a Planning Commission meeting and work through what do we want and take some more time to figure that out? Or would you rather us just respond and be done and then figure that out later and maybe you can apply later? I mean, do you have a preference? Do you feel like you're being strung along while we think through this? I know it's not a public comment. I'm sorry to offer.
Should Representative respond to this?
I wouldn't answer that last question.
Yeah, you don't have to. You can,
I'm not even sure what the question was.
You can say it was rhetorical.
And just for the record, your name, Travis.
Travis Shoup with Shoup Electric. Restate the question again. Sorry.
They're about to deny your this application.
Well, yeah, and you're not just denying my application, you're probably denying 99% of the applications for that building. So I think Tammy said that we owe it to the city to come to a conclusion as to what really is going to happen with this Main Street.
So that's what we're asking you.
So
Rather than voting
think
tonight, would you be okay, because we have a work meeting next week that or in 2 weeks that we're working with the Planning Commission on? We just don't want you to feel like we're not making a decision. If you want a decision, we can make one. If you're okay to hang out for a little while and let us look at this and see what we can work out, we're willing to do that.
No, yeah, we're okay to wait. We'll have to re-up maybe the contract with the South Davis Metro Fire, but that, to make a decision based on, it seems like there's a lot of polarity with this decision. I think you probably need to be, yeah. So, we're totally fine with it. We're not in a hurry to move. We saw an opportunity that worked well for us, and we thought worked well for the city, and so we made the offer. But yeah, we're not in a lease that we need to get out of or anything like that. So plenty of time on our end. But we, again, is that a year? Is that 2 years?
We just want to respect you as,
Yeah.
if
No,
you need
we-
a decision, we want to make one, but if not, we can.
We appreciate that. I don't know that the fire chief's not here, so I can't speak for him,
Right.
whether he's okay with delaying that, because he may be the one that needs the decision more than I do.
He'll let him know.
You know what I mean? He's probably the one that's more.
We are,
decision on that.
there is some pressure to get started on the new building, which the fire board has said you need a resolution on the old building before you can start on the new one, but a week is not going to make a difference, but I think if you want to deny this and then do some more, you can do that, or if you want to table this, I'm not clear that.
Well, as I said when I made my early comment, I would like to find a way to approve it, but I have enough indigestion that I would say no tonight. If he's willing to wait, then I think we go for another 2 weeks and take another crack at it at that point, following the.
Meeting with the planning
Did
commission.
we finalize, Steve, the planning commission meeting for Wednesday that I didn't really want to do Wednesday, but I am going to be here for?
Well, we were going to confirm that later, but if you want to confirm that now, we can confirm that.
I can do
If
it.
you're willing to do it, I think it'd be a good idea to have the discussion and see where people stand in terms of finding a way forward. At least getting a direction.
I'm good with it as well.
So you have a motion that you made on the table to deny this amendment that we haven't voted on. Do you want to continue with that, or you want to withdraw that motion and make a substitute motion to table?
Did you make it? I think George made it.
Oh, George made it?
Yep.
I apologize.
I made the motion,
I
so-
apologize, George.
No, that's fine. Not being able to see faces in real time is everyone's intent. Would you want me to withdraw the motion and somebody make a motion to table?
Yes, please.
Can I withdraw the motion?
You have to confirm that, I think.
Is the second?
I'm good with that, yes.
I would make a motion, following up on George's comment then, that we, having expressed our concerns to the Shoups, defer this for another 2 weeks until we see the results of the Planning Commission meeting next week.
So that's a motion to table the construction, sales, and services limited definition and use table amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor of tabling?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that's unanimous. We're sorry that you are coming to so many city council meetings, but it's really nice to have somebody join us. And I think that there's a genuine desire for the council to find a solution. I don't think they want to see the old fire station vacant, but have some legitimate concerns about how to address other concerns, which I didn't fully appreciate the concern that somebody else could put a warehouse on Main Street without a different use and that be an issue. Because the fire station is certainly a unique building, and
Yes.
it's hard to visualize how to use that space without storing things in the bay, which is a majority of the square footage. And so I think that's a challenge to figure that
Well, you
figure
could
that out.
easily use the bay with glass doors and have it be offices or retail show space, or, I mean, there are definitely.
Not easily, but you could
Yeah,
do something there.
definitely
Yeah.
ways that it could work if there were the demand for that.
Okay, so
Thank you.
it's tabled.
Okay.
We
Thank-
really just want an audience, you guys.
So thank you for your patience on this issue. All right, moving on to number 5, repeal of the impact fees. This hopefully should be very straightforward.
Can I cut to the chase?
Lisa?
I'd like to make, we've already talked about it, I'd like to make a motion that we approve 2017-25, because we've been assured that the fire district is implementing those fees.
Second.
Second?
So moved
Sure.
and seconded that we approve ordinance 2017-25 without hearing the lengthy, well-prepared staff report that Lisa prepared.
Sorry, Lisa.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See, we do vote aye.
Anybody opposed? This isn't a development issue.
Oh,
So that passes unanimously. Great. On to number 6, County Prop 1 grant application.
That's mine,
Steve.
right?
Yes.
Okay. I quoted in the staff report from the August 1st meeting minutes that a majority of the council indicated support for moving forward with the shared application with West Bountiful and applications to improve bus stops on Main Street and to construct a restroom along the Legacy Parkway Trail as long as the restroom is maintained by the county. Is maintained by the county. And then I mentioned in the staff report that regarding the restroom, that the very top of the application for this grant program says that if you sign this, that means you are accepting responsibility not only to complete the project, but to maintain it thereafter. And it's my recommendation to you that we not submit this as a application, that we join with other cities in South Davis to try and persuade the county. Just take it on yourself with your Proposition 1 money, and it would be a county responsibility thereafter. So I would suggest that one not be applied for. I have not prepared an application. I mean, if you really want us to submit one, we have until Friday to put one together, but we don't have the right, the private property secured or an agreement with a property owner adjacent to the road up in that area we were looking at. So unless you got questions on that, I'll move on to the other.
Yeah, my opinion on that is that Steve's convinced me that we probably don't want to submit an application for this, but I would like to message to the county that we think a restroom is needed, but that we don't think that we should be the ones maintaining it. So it could be in the form maybe of a letter or some kind of other communication that goes with this, that we had planned other applications, such as a restroom for the Legacy Trail or improvements to the foothills, but the expectation is that the county would be a partner in maintaining those, and that we are not comfortable taking on maintenance responsibilities for those, and so we did not apply for those. Because I think either of those projects, in my expectation is that these are multi-city benefits, and it makes more sense to have the county maintain them, especially if it's county property on the hillside or private property on Legacy Trail, than to have the city take on that maintenance burden.
Well, and perhaps to further that argument is until they have some kind of a regional solution or a plan, and in the case of the restrooms on the Legacy, they really ought to identify, okay, what do we need for the full length of this thing to address sanitation? As far as the hillside, what is kind of the regional plan for up along here, and Bountiful and Farmington and Centerville?
Which I don't disagree with at all, but but these things kind of drag on,
yes,
as we all know, especially with any of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so my concern is that there is still an immediate need, and I think that they know that, and this solution, if we clearly state we will not take on the maintenance responsibility, but we'd like to see in this area the immediate need met now, I don't know if there's any harm in, as long as we're clear that it would include them taking on the long-term maintenance, going ahead and asking for it to happen. It would really be a humongous improvement for the users of that trail.
I guess the issue is
And it's not too of an expensive a thing for them to do and choose from, and they see the need, and then they can just say yes to something that's right on their table, rather than, yes, we see the need, yes, we'll start a planning process, yes, a few years down the road there will finally be a restroom.
the only issue becomes that your application is dysfunctional in itself, because your first signature says, yeah, we will maintain it, but at the end you say, we understand you will maintain it.
Yeah, we'd have to edit that and say, we do not agree to this.
Right.
Now, maybe
You strike it out.
maybe you can strike it out, because I agree with your concept,
Yeah.
but
So, Steve, I guess you hear that, my sentiment is the council agrees this is needed and it's a good project, but
Yes.
we unanimously think we shouldn't be the ones maintaining it. We don't want to take on that maintenance burden.
That's correct.
So what's the best way to get that message to them?
do you have any feel for our other cities making a similar application.
For restrooms along there? Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, we have a 2.5 mile, 3 mile segment. Bountiful, West Bountiful has probably
Very little, because most of it along West Bountiful is out in the county, actually, outside their city limit. The
We
way,
actually have the largest, I think we may have more than Farmington, or about the same as Farmington in
Really?
terms of mileage.
It's in the city.
It's in the city,
Because of the
because
way-
theirs only goes from the Farmington border to Station Park,
yeah,
which is probably less than 2 miles,
yeah,
mile and a
Okay.
half.
surprised. I wouldn't have thought that.
yeah.
North Salt Lake has
I'm not
a
sure,
good-
I think North Salt Lake has a fairly good segment as well.
So is it better to, in your opinion, to fill out an application, but strike that out and say, hey, we're not gonna take maintenance responsibility, or just do some other communication to them?
Well, if you want to go forward with it, we do need to complete the application. It's a fairly, as you see the example,
Lengthy.
the one we've got online is fairly lengthy. I'd have to have Jake working on it between now and Friday. There's some things we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know right of way, the property location, having permission from the property owner. We haven't estimated the cost.
Why would we need approval from a property owner? Isn't it on a county right of way?
We don't have a location.
I don't think you, well, the general vicinity we're thinking of is the junction of 1275 North and Sheep Road, where the two trails come together. And so I guess you're asking, could it go on a public right-of-way or on the trail right-of-way? The
I
trail,
had just assumed that it would be on the existing right of way.
the road right-of-way, you have the trail in part of that right-of-way, as well as the road. And if you clearance issues with road traffic, you've got to meet certain minimum clearance of obstruction off the road. And so my staff is of the opinion it's probably got to be behind the trail, which means private property, yeah.
As long as we recognize that we're internally contradictory, I have no problem with asking staff to complete and submit it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
And it probably will have some incomplete parts to it. If you're trying to just send a message, how much of the cost are you willing to pick up? 20%, 30%? You want to say 10% if we're just trying to send a message?
A relatively small portion.
Yeah, small is a good thing.
Is 20, I mean, to
20,
build a
25 would be
restroom
fine with
and
me.
bring utilities is gonna be over $100,000.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case, yes.
So, I mean, I wouldn't suggest more than 20%.
No.
Well, what would 1 year of our 5% of the RAP tax be?
RAP tax, 5% is about $19,000.
Yeah,
So
so
fif-
try to
15%.
guesstimate so that it would be about in line with 1 year's of our.
10% or 15%?
Because then we have a fund source and that
That's
doesn't
good.
steal from something else.
Yeah, I like that.
That's a good idea.
Say 15% maybe. Well, depends on what our estimated cost is
Yeah,
after I
so-
talk
so
to staff.
after
And
estimated cost,
got to
that's
limit
what
it
we
to that
have the percentage
$19,000, $20,000 then is what you're saying.
It sounds like as we're going, let's send a message that we want to do it. We're not really willing to pay it for or maintain it, but we'll make a contribution.
Okay, Jake,
We
you
think
hear
it's
that?
needed.
Well,
Yeah, I
gonna
think
be-
Tammy's right, because if we wait for them to do the planning process on a bathroom, that's not going to be high on their priority list unless they're
And they-
actually the users.
Right, and maybe next year we could talk to other cities and have a joint plan for the entire.
I think
That would
putting
be
it
good.
at the Burnham Woods Trail spot, which is technically, it's in West Bountiful, it's a decent location too.
Well, that's where we have the connecting trail off to Maverick where there's restrooms.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the restroom issue. The bus stops, we have met with UTA. They don't want to participate in a joint application to the county at this time. They haven't figured out their costs. That depends on what kinds of improvements are going to be made at which stops. But whatever that they're willing to fully fund, to the extent that the allocation they assigned to Centerville, to the extent that funds those bus stops. Keeping in mind, though, that we're expecting UTA's money to be used for the match on the 1250 West application, not our own money. West Bountiful's assuming it'll be UTA's money as the local match. I'm recommending that our local match be UTA money. UTA spoke very positively last week that yes, we were willing to support that project. So the local match on the 1250 West improvements is $115,000, split between the two communities, say 55 to 60,000 for each community out of their UTA allocation. UTA's allocation to Centerville is the remaining amount on that after they've spent some of the money for their own professional services and consulting services and what all, is about $150,000. So 60,000 out of that would leave you about 90,000 towards some bus stops. They wanted to make sure, UTA reps wanted to make sure we understood that there's not going to necessarily be an allocation to every city each year. They just have done that these first couple of years to show some goodwill to all the cities and some benefit to all the cities in light of the passage of Proposition 1. So regarding bus stops, we'll talk about that in the next item. That brings me back to then 1250 West. You see the application in the packet. It's my recommendation that we support that as a joint application with West Bountiful. I think it'll be a tremendous improvement to both communities, of great value to not only vehicular traffic, but pedestrians and bicyclists. The reason UTA views it as one they can support is because it's providing connections to their bus stops and to trailheads, even though there's only 2 riders currently on 1250 West for their commuter route. By the way, that's the reason why they did not want to support on the bus stop item when we get to that, making any improvements at this time to their bus stops on 1250 West is because there's only 2 riders a day.
So our transit-oriented neighborhood isn't working so well transit-wise.
Well, here's what they said. They said that folks who live in apartments really want bus service that can take them many places, not just to work. So their point was UTA needs to study what kind of other routes do we need serving that area. And they would rather wait until they do that kind of analysis about other routes to serve that area before they get behind an improvement for bus stops.
So for an example, a bus up into Bountiful.
A bus over in their commercial area is some kind of a loop maybe that would take West Bountiful folks over to, or apartment folks, excuse me, over to the commercial area and maybe a loop down into Bountiful and come back. Yeah.
Do you know that
Costco and that, I can envision a loop that takes people around through the key commercial areas.
there is no school bus from down there? So
I heard
the
that.
kids either have to have a ride or they have to walk.
That's right. Yes, that surprised me.
And they actually are supposed to attend J.A. Taylor.
My kids rode the bus.
From those apartments?
From those apartments?
Yeah, there's a bus stop there.
Well,
Right, it's about a block south of the roundabout.
That's new to me.
That's news, because we were told there wasn't one, and we actually had a child that was trying to walk to Porter's Lane, or Parish Lane, down Parish Lane, and across the overpass.
Now, was that just beginning of this school year that
Well,
they
that was
did that?
last school year, end of last.
End of last school year?
That's interesting. We'll check into it.
Yeah, I'd heard the same thing, Robin, that there wasn't any.
Sounds legitimate.
Yeah.
My kids rode it.
Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that, because I was concerned about that. So anyway, so we're back to this 1250 West. I'd recommend you authorize the mayor to sign a letter in support of that. The application does make you indicate whether there was a opportunity for public comment on it, or public involvement somehow in making this selection. So we thought, well, let's put it on for public comment. We can answer that question, yes, if you show it on the agenda for public comment. That's my recommendation to you.
Public comment when? Next?
As part of this item, it's opening up for public comment as whether there's any public comment.
Steve, please.
I'm happy to hold a courtesy public hearing. Steve, anything you'd like to comment on these Prop 1 funds?
No, I just wondered if you want me to sit over there so people think there's somebody in the audience.
Yeah, could you be in line with the camera?
One thing that I would say about the bus stops is, could we state our preference if there were limited amount of projects that could be done out of those 4, that we focus first on improving the stops without the pullout? I would hate for the...
Can we hold it until we get to the next item?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I maybe had to skip over that and missed it.
Well, I've been kind of mixing them up, so I understand why you may have thought that. But,
So any concerns about supporting the West Bountiful joint application? Everybody on board with that?
I think it
As a
sounds
top
great.
priority? I
That's
think
good.
it's a
Okay.
long-term good thing.
great. We'll,
So we're putting in 2. 1 internally disagreeing, but 2.
yeah, right. So
One
if
which
you
we
have
expect
a,
to-
let's have a motion, if you wouldn't mind, supporting the joint application with West Bountiful regarding 1250 West and 640 West in same street.
As the primary,
A-
as the number one
As
priority, yeah.
our highest priority, and then secondly, application regarding restroom with the clarification that we would not be
Maintain it.
maintaining it. We do expect the county to maintain it.
And have a limited match.
And I liked the idea of striking out even that line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Agreement, to
Yeah.
be perfectly
Would they
clear.
be separate, or can they be combined?
Well, it has to be a separate application.
No, the motion.
The motion can be one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Probably all one.
Okay, I would
So-
Make
move
that
that
motion.
the council provide show formal support for supporting a 1250 West, 640 West
Joint application.
joint application with West Bountiful. And further, that staff be directed to prepare and modify an application for restroom facilities along the Legacy Trail, making it clear that the city is not going to be maintaining that, and that our contribution would be approximately 15% of the cost.
Well, how we
To
put it
be
this way, it would be approximately
Not more than-
approximately 20,000.
No more than-
No more than
15%
no more
or
than
$20,000.
$20,000, yeah.
Second.
No more than 15% or $20,000,
$20,000.
up to $20,000. Okay.
I'll second that.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
George,
George.
you still with us?
I got an eye in there somewhere. This is the letter.
George is an aye too.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Okay,
So
bus
that-
stops.
So now we are on bus stops, and, we're getting really squeezed in this thing between UDOT and UTA.
We're in the middle of a fight between those two. And
We had a meeting with UTA last week, and they are of the general opinion, were to begin with, that they don't want to see pullouts. UDOT has kind of strong-armed them on this, on Main Street. But the mayor and I conveyed to UTA last week that we met with Chris Peterson, and that Chris said that if there's good reasons why you can't do a pullout, then we'll consider that. And one of those, for example, is if you can't get the right-of-way without condemnation, then that's a good reason to not have a pullout.
Does that mean that we would have to have some kind of evidence from each property owner saying, no, there's no way I'm going to give you this property?
Well, I think if we just, I think UDOT would rely on our representation of the conversations with the property owners in that case. But I got a call today from a consultant who is hired by UTA to pursue the design of bus stop improvements in Centerville, dependent upon what you decide tonight.
They've hired one for
Well, they have,
Hopefully
they
not
have-
just for Centerville.
No,
Okay.
no, not just for
That's
They-
Centerville.
really
Their
worried.
previous engineer left
Yeah,
a couple weeks ago, and so the person that was leading this project essentially is gone. So
yes,
we gotta have somebody.
that's
new.
right,
wow.
that's right. So I got a call today from him, and he reiterated that UDOT's preference is to have pullouts, and yet he'd heard that we'd had some conversation with Chris Peterson, so I reviewed that with him. Then he had to interrupt the call and take another one, and he and I haven't talked again. He's going to call back tomorrow. So anyway, this is kind of up in the air still. I'm hoping that the factors like the current locations of expensive business signs and the way that land drops off from the highway, from Main Street to the west, and making pullouts even more expensive are going to be good reasons why UDOT would say no pullouts is okay at these locations. But there is one location, as I said in the staff report, where we think that if you don't have a pullout, if we put it actually in front of the post office without a pullout, we're going to have some serious conflicts. Because we already have conflicting left turns. If you have a bus there without being able to get off the road some more, you have people going around the bus where you already have the conflicting left turns. The staff that included the police chief, Kevin Campbell, Randy, myself, Corey, we all agreed this is one location where it makes sense to have a pullout. It's going to be taking the place of 2 stops. So UTA is concerned that having a pullout would lengthen the route, would make it less reliable, is somewhat offset by the fact we're replacing 2 stops with 1, plus the chief's point was the fact that the light's right there does create some gaps in the traffic and would allow that bus to get back in the traffic lane. Better here than it would at some other places.
In my experience, the buses don't particularly care about the traffic. They just pull out.
Bill, could you grab the microphone?
I'm sorry. In my experience, the buses don't particularly care about the traffic. They just pull out.
Now this one that's stopping over here seems to, at least my experience, seems to be fairly timid about with cars coming around it, but I don't know. You may be right, Bill.
It's my experience.
But this is what we're dealing with. We're caught up in this struggle between UTA and UDOT.
I'm not in favor of pullouts. I don't like them, but I think that in order to get some of these things done, we have to show some good faith. And if there was one spot that might make sense for a pullout, this seems like certainly better than any of the other spots along Main Street for a pullout. I see a lot of people, sitting on the curb waiting for buses there. The shelter is used.
This is our busiest
Yeah.
spot, is right here, plus the one across in the park.
I'd really like to move this forward. I'd prefer not to have a pullout, but if we can't get UDOT to play without
Yeah.
giving them one pullout.
I don't disagree, and what my comment was going to be is I would want to make clear, though, that if there were, because the pullout is going to be very expensive. So I wouldn't, out of these 1, 2, 3, 4 stops, the worst case scenario for us would be to have them spend all the money on the pullout and then not do the improvement, the simpler, less expensive improvements on the other stops. And so what I would like to communicate is we want you to give priority to these other stops and getting those improvements there, and then see if you can still afford.
So just out of curiosity, improvements without a pullout, $50,000, improvements with a pullout, $500,000?
15,000 without a pullout.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to remember the numbers from an email they sent some time ago.
What we spent on this was.
Well, the shelter's about 5, the concrete work might be 5, getting an easement and trash can and a bench. Yeah, I think 15 to 20,000 is probably what we're talking about.
And with the pullout?
That was,
The-
that,
Sounds like the full amount of what they're saying we have left for Centerville's allocation. And so that's what I'm saying. I'd rather
You're probably
not,
talking 50 grand. but
yeah, I think
not
that,
100 grand.
I think, yeah, I'm gonna guess that's more like, it, depending on what you gotta do to accommodate the pullout. If you have an expensive retaining wall because the land falls off,
right,
but it doesn't here, the post office.
and to get the land.
And to pay for the land, that'll be something, either an easement or a outright purchase.
Do we know that the post office will agree to that?
I've only had a conversation 2 years ago with the owner of the ground. It was favorable, but at that time, it was just gonna be a shelter and related things, not a pullout, so
It's
I,
very
We
different.
can have a conversation and say, support a shelter, and,
so.
you know, if the property owner only supports a shelter, but we've said to UDOT, hey, we're willing to do it.
Yeah,
then-
that's right.
Then that's
But-
great, we move it
But
forward.
again, we have then the hazard that I'm talking about.
Yeah, we do.
I do
That's
agree because it's across the street from City Hall and has the emergency services
the left
pulling
turn
out.
That's right.
Is the only reason I agree that we might actually need to support it. But I would still rather wait and not have it this year's funding if it makes it so the more affordable stops don't get done.
So are you in support of us having UTA go forward with studying those 4 locations then, assuming that we can get 3 of them without a pullout? And let's see what kind of cost numbers they come up with.
Yes.
Yes.
Why just 3? Aren't there 6 or 7 on there?
Well, they didn't think there was gonna be enough money to go more than those 4.
Okay.
And the last 2, which is, I think the 598 North Main is Bonita Way.
That's
problematic.
No, that is one of them, 598. If it's not a pullout, it's the one across the street on the east side that's especially problematic. We'd rather hold off on the east
Yeah,
side.
the west side is good.
A
It's
good
spot.
611 north.
So
Yeah.
it's 255 north, that's the post office,
Yep.
26 south, 15 south, just across the street from 26 south, and then 590, excuse me,
611
okay, Mayor, I'm sorry, 611 north
is the west side.
is the west side, so that is
Bonita
the,
Way and Piney,
that is the 4th one, yeah, you're right. And then the
The
other
ones that they want to hold off on are the east side of the street and then down.
by Pages Lane,
83 South Main, I think, is in front of the courtyard,
courtyard at Pages Lane.
Pages Lane, which
Yeah.
has some access, and there's a pipeline and
Well,
not a lot of ridership.
we don't have the same argument about not a pull-off there, because you don't have drop-off, that is a place where pull-out could be
And so
accommodated.
strategically, it's our choice to say,
It's not a
don't
priority.
study it right now.
Yeah,
It's a good choice.
yeah. So
Okay.
that's why we argued to leave that one off for now.
Sounds good.
And UDOT didn't think they could have enough money for more than those 4.
And generally, we think of, you want stations where people are waiting to catch the bus to go to Salt Lake, or here, we have a lot of people who work on Paris Lane who are catching it to go north. I'm not sure we would have a lot of people, it's a.
Not that one.
Catching
more people-
it to go north,
Yeah,
much
catching it to go
south.
north from there.
Well, possible, at that,
Maybe
at
people
that
coming down from
15 South
Yeah.
Main, that would serve Cedar Springs residents who want to go north.
Yeah.
And those 2 stops that are part of the 4
Mm-hmm.
would serve Cedar Springs residents, where you would expect you might have more than normal users.
So I would suggest that we have them proceed, do the engineering on it. Is there another opportunity to bring back the final designs for approval before we?
Well, let's
pull the
just make
trigger?
that the expectation.
Yeah, I think we say that,
I
let's
think that sounds
proceed,
great.
but before we pull the trigger,
You want to see the cost estimates and
see
have the
cost estimate, we
opportunity
wanna see the
to
final design.
prioritize if necessary. Okay?
Yep.
Great,
That sounds great.
all right.
Do you need a motion, or is that sufficient? Just direction?
I think that's probably sufficient at this point, yeah. And we'll come back for formal action.
That sounds good.
great. You want to take a quick break now before Mike Smith should be here in 5 or 10 minutes, for the mayor's report is very quick. We can do it.
So is mine. Mine's really quick, too.
I'm fine to keep going, but
Let's do them.
Go ahead, Mayor, you got
Keep going.
1.5 minutes.
Okay.
we already discussed kind of the work session on the South Main Street plan. Corey's left us, but I think there's been enough consternation about, we all want to say no to, or know what we're against, but what are we for, and can we have a discussion with the Planning Commission and find some common ground on a way forward for positive redevelopment? And this is Corey's idea of how to find a way forward. We may get in that work session and find out, hey, we like some of these design guidelines or design elements, and this isn't the way forward. But I think it's worth having that discussion now, seeing if we can make some progress, and if not, then we'll try something else. But this
Not be any worse off than we already are.
If you're willing to spend an hour and a half with the Planning Commission, I think it would help us have that joint conversation.
And that's next Wednesday at 5:30.
Next Wednesday at 5:30, 5:30 to 7.
Yeah, try to get here ready to start at 5:30. We'll have dinner ready at 5:15. Okay.
Only other thing I wanted to give you an update on is Bruce Cox and I have been working with Elder Tingey and his family on the Tingey Pavilion for the community park expansion. I had a couple of proposed designs. It's basically going to be a 20 by 30 pavilion. The reason also to bring this back is Bruce feels very strongly that in addition to the pavilion and a marker, that we ought to install a drinking fountain. The utilities are stubbed there, a drinking fountain, and have some electricity in that corner of the park. People often rent a pavilion, they want to plug in something, a crock pot or an amplifier to talk or something. And with 2 additional soccer fields there, they're all going to be pretty far away from any source of water. So we're going to try to do our best to get the Tingey money to cover all that, but Bruce anticipates that we might need, another few $1,000s in city money to finish out a drinking fountain and electrical stub to make that really a quality project, which is a small price to pay to get all those improvements. So once we have a design, then we'll come back begging for, or with a plan on how to get it installed. I think there's a desire to get that kind of set this calendar year.
So it can be incorporated next year?
Incorporated next year, and or they may want to make the donation this calendar year for tax purposes.
Oh, okay.
And get that done. We wouldn't build it until next spring as part of the next project, but at least and I've set that expectation, but get the plan finalized for them. That's my report.
Okay, and then the Trails Committee would like to meet with you on October 3rd, prior to your regular meeting that night, again at 5:30. They want to report on the planning they have been doing regarding a mountain bike trail, including their discussions with Bountiful City and County. They want to report on how they intend still to go forward with their planning and the assistance they would like with that planning from a professional to some extent, and probably asking for some money, I assume some RAP tax money, to help bring on that professional advice. Now, are you with the Trails Committee, or are you?
Robin is.
Oh, Robin is. Did I summarize that right, Robin?
Yeah.
So, unless there's any objections, I'll tell them that you're willing to meet with them on October 3rd.
That's our first meeting.
The what?
That's our first meeting.
in October.
Yes, I'm sorry, the October 3rd, yes, the first meeting in October. And then,
We didn't have Corey coming back with the, like, R6 or whatever
The
from
gradation
that,
ordinance.
did we?
Um,
Because that was
We do have a
something that we were
draft that-
trying to really hurry.
That'll go to the planning commission first.
Okay.
yeah,
And I'm not sure if that's on perhaps for the 13th maybe of September, but
Okay.
yeah.
I just don't want to
No,
push that one off.
he has said enough to me that I know that he recognizes that's an urgent, that's a
Okay.
very high priority.
Priority for what?
That's probably a main council meeting.
The
discussion, not a work-
gradations
not a
of the
work session.
Okay,
medium
great.
residential zone. The other item I want to mention is that Ron Backman, I informed you earlier, is retiring, and he doesn't want a big public reception, but the Public Works Department will be having lunch with him next Thursday at noon, the 14th. I think that's Thursday. Whatever the 14th is, I think that's Thursday. Next week at noon at the Public Works Building. If any of you would like to come, just let me know, preferably tonight, so I can include you in the count for the food. Anybody know offhand, or you just let me know by tomorrow morning if you would.
I would like to.
I would like to as well.
Stephanie and
Yes.
Robin.
Let me see if I can rearrange my schedule. I'd
And
like
May.
to do something for Ron.
Okay. So we'll add those 3 to the count.
But I need to move something. Well,
Okay.
I think I can come, it might be 12:15 or
That's fine.
12:20 before I
Yeah,
get there.
that's fine. Okay. That's it for me.
Okay, that covers,
Could I add a miscellaneous?
you could, so we have 2 miscellaneous, and I'd like to have a break before our closed meeting.
And there's
What do
mine.
you want to add to the miscellaneous? And we may want
It's a very brief thing. I took our idea of recognizing the founding families on the pavilion to the museum
Whitaker.
board, and I discovered that Paul Smith, who's a board member, has been researching the original families, and we're looking just in the first couple of years at about 300 families.
So that's
So
more pillars
it's
than
a
we have.
little more daunting of a task than I had anticipated. So the conversation that we had was that maybe it would be good to do a big plaque and list by year the families that came in that first little section. So
first few years.
just to
300
throw that out, it's pretty crazy.
So we have a list on the plaque that's over there, but it's,
Is it a list
So
of
I don't-
families?
no.
A list of
I
families?
meant to
I think
bring
it's
his
individuals.
list, and he's not prepared to say it's exhaustive, but he's close. But I neglected to bring that tonight. So if you'd like a list, I can get it to you. But it might be better to list them by year and,
Yeah, I think
One
we
big plaque.
are
One
going to have to
big
come back, or I think it'd be great to have a list of founding families.
I do too.
But in addition, I think it'd be great to identify a few other key individuals, the Dual brothers, a smaller number that you could do profiles of individuals
Okay.
and not
There
the whole.
was some concern about whether we were trying to double bill the accomplishments or contributions of some families because of their greater wealth. And there was some concern that maybe they were duplicating what the museum already does in having those stories and those things available if people wanted to come there. But if you'll just, that's all I had.
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that
my
we're looking at a
direction
lot
would-
more families than we thought we were.
So, great. If they want to come up with a plaque to do a lot of families, that's great. I think the vision is, can we add a few more individuals to the park and use it as a way to recognize and tell the stories of individuals? You can't, it's hard to tell the stories of 300.
It is.
But you could tell the story of 1 or 2 or maybe 6 over
Yeah.
a number
So
of years.
that was the thing they were concerned about, is how do you pick and choose which ones?
I
So-
agree.
That's
That's
why
so
we
there
make
was a
them-
little more
That's why
tricky.
we make them pick and not us.
Well, maybe your first priority is, how about fundraising for a new sign?
Yeah, let's start with that. So I'm looking for a volunteer to lead up fundraising. I would like, if we're going to do this name change, I think we ought to do it right. I think we need a nice quality sign and maybe it's a quality plaque that goes with it to show we're recognizing founders and founding families, and we're also recognizing the William R. Smith family. And was hoping that some of you who felt very strongly about this, and obviously I'm looking at you, Robin, since you are prolific at talking to people, and I think you would be very good at this fundraising, to help with the fundraising effort, to do it nice and do a really good job.
I would be glad to do that. And actually, some of the family members that were here have already contacted me and said that they would be willing to go to their family members and see what they could collect.
Fabulous.
Don't think they realized how expensive it could be. But
Yeah, and I actually would say too that we already have a professionally designed slight redesign of the front of Frontage Park for when there is a new sign placed, to kind of play off the bus station improvements and improve the flower bed and the layout of that. And so not suggesting that that would have to take priority and happen all at once, but being sure that when we go to the trouble of putting new signage up, that it's in place with that plan.
So is that something that you've got a copy of, or the Parks Committee has a copy they can get?
The city.
Well, actually,
Get to Robin?
yeah, Mayor, was that in the time he was not on the
No.
council?
No, I remember doing it, I just don't know where it is.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah,
we've got it,
I
yeah.
remember.
The city would have
doing
it, Dan would have it.
Yeah, we've
I
got
have
it.
a copy in my emails.
Yeah, we've got it.
Okay, so let's get it to Robin so she can use that to say, this is what we're envisioning.
Yeah.
okay.
You know, when, it helps fundraising when you have something
Yeah.
to show people.
And if you can give me an idea of fund cost.
Yeah.
And if they want to contribute more, we got that
Yeah, we could, maybe we could.
300
improve that
family,
entire
founding
frontage
families
and-
plaque to work on.
Really great.
Okay. Okay, I'd suggest we take a 3-minute break while Mike sets up, and let Mike set up his demo while we take a quick break. Is that okay?